Aloha everybody, and thank you for joining me for another uploaded video. And today I've been really excited to share with you some interesting thoughts, concepts, experiences, and also some information on some cool books that I have here in regards to Menehunes, trolls, elemental realms, Lemuria, and Hawaii. So I'm going to begin with my very first experience with a troll-like entity, let's put it that way. It happened when I was 4 years old, and I remember as clear as day, and it happened in my old childhood home in Honolulu, Hawaii. This home was located in an area where ancient Hawaiian sacrifices used to be made. In addition to that, Punchbowl Cemetery, which is where the home was but on that crater, Punchbowl Cemetery is not only a burial site for unmarked war victims, but it's also, again, a place where Hawaiians used to sacrifice humans. Not that long ago either. In addition to that, later on in my childhood, once I did move out of that house that I lived in, I found out from the owners that a person had committed suicide in that home before we started living there. So I personally believe that all of these different influences created an environment, so to speak, for me to experience what I had experienced. And I have experienced quite a good handful of elementals and demonic beings, and I guess you could say they were trolls in Hawaii, in that house. So again, it all began when I was 4, and keep in mind, this was before I knew anything about the history of Hawaii. This is before I knew anything about what Menehunes even were. And it was probably really early in the morning, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and my mom was having a very bad nightmare next to me. And I woke up and was very startled to notice that there were 5 beings or entities that were on the side of my mother's side. It was almost as if that's why she was having her nightmare. I don't know. So I closed my eyes in fear. I remember the temperature began to drop. I started to get chicken skin. I started to shake violently because I was trembling from fear from what I had just saw, because I didn't understand what they were. And as I opened my eyes again to look beside me, the 5 beings, who were about maybe 2 feet high, had made their way around my mom's bed. And I had kept my eyes open for probably just a second or two, enough to recognize that each 5 of them were very different looking. I know that the one in front looked very skeletal looking, with a a cape sort of looking outfit, and he also had a sickle. Craziness. I mean, I didn't have books at home, that describe these beings. This is the first time ever I'd ever experienced anything like this, and it was in such great detail, and the energy was just so dark and so freaky. I will never forget it. That was the first time I saw these little dudes. What they were, I can't necessarily confirm that for you. I know that they were dark. I know that they were mischievous. Going forward a few more years later, I think I was 6 or 7, and keep in mind, I've had a lot of ghost experiences in this house. I used to hear a lot of noises, a lot of sounds, a lot of footsteps going back and forth in my hallway. Anyway, so this particular experience is probably the most freaky for me. I remember waking up again in the middle of the night to that feeling or that sensation that I was not alone. And oftentimes when I would wake up with this feeling, something would happen. So I wake up with that feeling, right? And I start looking over my shoulder, over to my side again and again. I'm on a bunk bed. And on the third time that I look over to my side, there's an entity about 3 feet long lying right beside me. And his head is in the opposite direction of me, meaning his head was by my feet, and my head was by his feet. So he looked like a troll. You know, as I got older and I saw these fantasy books for kids and things like that, I kind of got startled because what I had saw in there looked very similar to what I had saw in that experience. He was very ugly. He had a long chin, a long nose. He had an old style hat on with a rim. He had old style clothing and pants that went up to his knees and curly shoes. It was the weirdest thing. And he was just lying there with his hands over himself like this, not moving in anything. And when I saw that, for that moment, I just screamed bloody murder, you know, screamed. And my mom would come and she'd start breaking out the Bible and start praying and stuff. It's pretty intense. It was an intense time for me. But as I became older, I began to learn about the history of Hawaii and about Menehunes. What are Menehunes? Menehunes, according to the Hawaiians, are smaller beings. They're often described as short, fat, happy, jolly men. And they supposedly had a lot to do with the building of Hawaii long, long ago. And they still exist on other dimensions, I guess. I don't know. But as I began to learn about the history of Hawaii and what Menehunes were and how they were described as trolls, I took it upon myself to perhaps maybe put 2 and 2 together. Maybe that's what I had seen. Maybe that was a Menehune. I have no idea. So I wanted to share with you some information that I have in regards to elementals, spirits, fairies, and a couple other things here that I'm going to share with you. First off is from this book here. It's one of my most favorite books. It's called Behaving as If the God in All Life Mattered. And this book is written by Michelle Small-Wright, and she's a spiritual pioneer beginning in the 70s with her ability to see and hear the devas from the garden from the garden. So with that, I'm going to share with you a little bit of what she had learned through her experience, and maybe that might shed some light a little bit here. It says, thanks to centuries of tradition, fairy tales, and folklore, most people think of nature spirits in terms of elves, gnomes, fairies, and little people of the woods. I have experienced nature spirits as swirling spheres of light energy. I have walked through the woods with one of these balls of energy moving beside me, and, when necessary, I've moved around a tree while the ball of energy continued to move straight through the line, coming out the other side. My personal inner vision lies in the area of energy. I tend to see waves of energy dynamics, and interplay. In fact, I tend to see the reality around me as energy first. Then 5 senses form. So I'm comfortable with the concept of energy reality. I was not familiar or comfortable with the concept of fairies, elves, or gnomes. Having read mostly horse books during my childhood, I simply did not have a background steeped in fairy tales and folklore. So, out of consideration for me, when this level of nature intelligence chose to be visible, it chose a context with which I was comfortable, energy. Had I seen an elf or a gnome come towards me, I definitely would have checked myself into a rubber room. She continues, nature spirits rarely choose to be visible to humans, and when they do, it's for a specific purpose. Among other reasons, it can be to give the person to whom they are appearing tangible proof of their existence. Or it can be a moment of high celebration about something that has been accomplished between the nature, spirits, and the humans involved. I've learned that they cannot be forced to appear at the will or whim of a human. If they appear, it is because they find it important to do so. She continues here, I have also learned from the nature spirits that they do indeed appear to humans in the form of elves, fairies, gnomes, and so forth, but only to people who are comfortable with these concepts. To do this, they make use of our own thought forms. We humans have developed a long tradition of what, for example, an elf looks like. We have books and stories and artist conceptions all detailing the little creatures. Those highly stylized thought forms are released from us and become part of the earth's reality. When a nature spirit desires to become visible to someone, it has access to this reality and can use its thought forms or combinations of thought forms to aid in it creating a body, quote unquote, through which to appear. So it is quite possible for someone who has actually seen nature spirits to interpret it as seeing elves. So here she has confirmed for me that spirits of different sorts can choose who they appear to and how they look like. They don't necessarily look like that. I found that very interesting. So again, that's this book here. I highly recommend that you guys get it. It's called Behaving as If the God in All Life Really Matters. It really teaches you the alchemy of spirit and how we're all interconnected. And in this book, she goes on to how she worked with the garden to create and manifest shovels and just crazy manifestation type of stuff she talks about going through in working with the Deva spirits in this garden. So it's very fascinating. I'm going to move on to the next book, which talks about the Elvins a little bit more. And this book is called Cariel, Lemurian Legacy for the Great Shift. This is written by Kahu Fred Sterling from the island of Hawaii. And he channels Master Cariel. And Master Cariel goes on in this book in great detail about Lemuria and how Lemuria was run and how that relates to where we're going now. I'm going to share a little excerpt from that later. But first, let's go into the Elven world. And he describes here that in the beginning of the Lemurian time, there were beings or entities that were a combination of angel and elven spirit. And according to Master Cariel, through their singings, they were called singers of Lemuria. Through their singing, this is really deep. It goes on and on, paragraph after paragraph about this. But it describes about how they helped to create Lemuria. So these original Lemurians, according to him, were part Elven. I find that very, very fascinating. Because, okay, we're going to move forward. Because when you go into actual Hawaiian history, excuse all the tabbies, this book is called Exploring Hawaii, Places of Power, History, Mystery, and Magic. When you go into the history of Hawaii, you'll find that the culture and the history of Hawaii is steeped in the Menehune. The Menehunes are what have built many of the very, very ancient sites that have been in Hawaii for forever. I'm going to give you a few examples. One example here is the Haleki'i and Pihana Heiau at Kahului. I believe this is on the island of Maui. And it is believed that these structures were built by the Menehune. Let's see if I can give you a picture of this real close. That's a picture of the heiau that, according to the Hawaiians, were anciently built by Menehunes. Very fascinating. And then, let's move forward a little bit to another ancient site in Hawaii that was also built by the Menehunes, according to the Hawaiians. And that is not built, but it was inhabited by This is the Waipio Valley of the Hamakua district in the island of Hawaii, or the Big Island. And this is what the valley looks like. It's very, very beautiful. So this again goes on to explain that the Menehune, or the small legendary people, were reported to have lived here for thousands and thousands of years. All right, and let's look at another example. We have here the Ulopo Heiau Kailua in the island of Oahu. That is the island that I lived in. And this is a 30-foot high wall, Ulupo Heiau, and what that means is temple with a Menehune pathway. Let's show you what that looks like. So again, this ancient site has been reported to have been built by these Menehunes. It says the Ulopo is so ancient that it is believed the Menehune built it. The small Menehune had a reputation for hard work, and they are believed to have hauled the rocks a long distance, passing them down a line hand to hand in a single night. A pathway of stones leading across the platform is known as Menehune Pathway. Very interesting. Okay, and lastly, the Ale Koko Menehune fish pond, again built by the legendary forest people, is what it says. Let me give you a close-up of what that looks like. It says, did the little forest dwellers build this tranquil pond,